Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Hall of Fame Predictions. In this episode, this is going to be part one of a two-part series where we're going to be covering the 5 fights on the main card of UFC 242 coming up Saturday, September 7th out of the arena in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. So on this episode, part one, we're going to be covering the first 3 fights on the main card, and on part 2, we're going to be covering the co-main event and the main event, Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder, and Habib, the Eagle Nurmagomedov versus Dustin the Diamond Poirier. So if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. I really appreciate the support. And if you like what you see, maybe give me a thumbs up as well. But I appreciate you joining as always. Fight 1 on the main card, UFC 242. We got Mairbek Taisumov versus Diego Ferreira. This is coming out of the lightweight division. So the betting odds for this fight, Mairbek is a -270 favorite. A little bit of background on these guys. So Mairbek, he's 31 years old. He's 5'9", 73-inch reach. He's a Russian-Austrian fighter of Chechen descent who trains out of Vienna, Austria. Actually splits time between Vienna, Austria and Tiger Muay Thai in Phuket, Thailand. 7-1 in the UFC. 27-5 overall MMA record, coming off 6 wins in a row, 5 of them by knockout. 24 of his 27 wins have come by stoppage, so 15 of those by knockout, 9 of them by submission. This guy is a straight killer, finisher, really exciting fighter. Fighting Diego Ferreira, 34 years old, 5'9", 74-inch reach. Diego comes from the Amazon in Brazil. He's now fighting out of Texas, though. He's the former Legacy FC lightweight champion. He's got a 15-2 MMA record, 6-2 in the UFC, and he's coming off 4 wins in a row. So a lot of momentum heading into this fight for these two fighters. Let's take a look at striking, though. Diego only has 3 knockouts in his career, but 2 of those have come in the last 3 fights. So it's an area that he's been focusing a lot on, and I think the results are starting to speak for themselves. But it really is day and night when you compare Diego's striking to Mairbek. Mairbek has a gorgeous array of speed, power, and accuracy. As I said, he's knocked out 5 of his last 6 opponents, 6 wins in a row, 5 of them by knockout. 3 of those were in the first round. 2 of those were in the second round. So he's not just beating these guys up, making them bloody and getting the stoppages. I mean, he is putting guys to sleep. So clear striking advantage for Mairbek in this fight. When it comes to grappling, Diego has the clear advantage from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu aspect in this fight. He is a 3rd-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Out of his 15 wins, 6 of them have come by submission. And he hasn't submitted anybody since 2014. So every single one of his wins in the last 5 years have come by either decision or by TKO. And so I'm afraid, although he's improving in his striking, maybe he's getting away from the one aspect of mixed martial arts that got him to the pinnacle of the sport here in the UFC. His TKOs have sort of been set up by his dominant positioning from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's sort of taken control of them on the ground and beating them up and getting some finishes. So it's not like these TKOs, the striking that he's been improving, has been solely based on the feet. His Jiu-Jitsu is setting some of that stuff up. But I think that Diego's clear pathway to victory here is by executing on his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's not going to win the stand-up battle with Mairbek. He really needs to focus on his Jiu-Jitsu in this fight, I believe. Mairbek is an animal on the ground too, though. Being from Eastern Europe, wrestling is sort of just in their blood. He really has superb wrestling, and he actually has spent significant time training with the Turkish national team. So Mairbek's superb wrestler. Out of his 27 wins, 9 of them, I mentioned, have come by submission. So this guy is no slouch on the ground. Exactly 1/3 of all of his wins are coming via submission. So I do give the grappling advantage, or excuse me, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu advantage to Diego Ferreira. I think being a third-degree black belt, there's really no argument there. The guy is extremely dangerous when it comes to a submission game. But I think that Merabak is just an animal. He's got really good wrestling, really good scrambling abilities. He's really strong. He's got great cardio. And so I think overall, Merabak might have the advantage on the ground too. So we'll see. I'm interested to see where this fight takes place. I think it's going to be a combination of standing and the ground game. But when it goes to the ground, it's going to be really interesting to see who has more of the dominant positions and threatens with submissions and stuff like that. They're both very talented on the ground. But my prediction for this fight, I don't see Merabak losing this fight. He's not going to lose the striking battle. I don't see Diego landing some big overhand right and having that sort of puncher's chance at winning on the feet. I think he's definitely going to win the striking battle. And when it comes to the ground, you know, Diego can threaten with some submissions. But as I mentioned, I just think Diego's skill set on the ground, he's not going to get himself into those difficult or dangerous situations. So I just don't see Merabak losing this fight. And, you know, this guy, Merabak, he's battled some injuries and things like that in the past. And so we haven't seen him as active as we would like. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with Merabak Chimaev, he has top 10, maybe even top 5 written all over him. This guy possesses all of the necessary skill sets to be an absolutely elite fighter here in the UFC, in the lightweight division, excuse me, the most stacked division in the UFC. This guy can really make a name for himself. And I think with a win here, he'll be in the top 15. After that, who knows who they set him up with. I could really see this guy catapulting himself towards more the top of this division here very soon. This guy is incredibly dangerous and a very fun fighter to watch. I've got Merabak by 3rd round TKO. So for our second fight of the night, we got a heavyweight matchup. Number 4 ranked Curtis Razor Blaydes versus number 9 Shamil Abdurrahimov. Betting odds for this fight, Curtis Blaydes minus 350 favorite. So let's take a background look at some of these guys. Shamil Abdurrahimov, he's a Dagestani fighter, 6'3", 76-inch reach. He's 37 years old, 20-4 MMA record. He's coming off of 3 straight wins after getting knocked out by Derek Lewis. So this guy's a 5-time Sanshu Russian national champion, which is a martial art composed of kickboxing, wrestling, takedowns, sweeps, throws, etc. And he's also the former ADFC heavyweight champion, the Abu Dhabi Fighting Championship heavyweight champion. And he's up against Curtis Blaydes, who is 28 years old. He's just getting into his prime. Curtis is 6'4". He's got an 80-inch reach, so he's got a 4-inch reach advantage in this fight. Curtis got an 11-2 MMA professional record, coming off a unanimous decision win over Justin Willis. Curtis is a former Illinois high school state champion wrestler. He's a former JUCO national champion wrestler who actually dropped out of college to pursue a career in mixed martial arts, and he's been doing a heck of a job ever since. As I mentioned, he's got an 11-2 MMA record. Both losses are to the same guy. Francis Ngannou has been the only one able to sort of solve the Curtis Blaydes puzzle thus far. When it comes to striking, early on in Shamil's career, he was a relatively low volume fighter, not overly cautious or timid. He very much liked to pick his shots, but past few years we've seen him get much more comfortable, I think, inside the octagon and with his striking ability, and that volume has tended to increase a little bit. He's also knocked out 2 of his last 3 opponents. So, you know, I think his pathway to victory is certainly on the feet with Curtis Blaydes. I'll touch on Curtis's wrestling and grappling in a second, but Shamil's pathway to victory in this fight is to stand and bang, and I think make it a dirty fight. I'd really like to see him increase his output against Curtis Blaydes. Curtis, as big as he is, as big of a frame as he's got, he doesn't like being hit, and I think if Shamil is able to keep it standing and land some big punches on Curtis, that is his clear pathway to victory in this fight. Blaydes, though, I mentioned his frame, and he's got a 4-inch reach advantage in this fight. He just doesn't strike a whole lot on his feet. At distance, only 36% of his overall significant strikes are landed at distance. That's just over 1 out of 3. I mean, the vast majority of striking that Curtis Blaydes does is on the ground or even sometimes in the clinch. But when he does exchange on the feet, I feel like Curtis is really strong and powerful, and he's got a ton of speed. He's really athletic. Like, I'm not sure what his boxing training regimen is like, but I felt like if he put a good deal of focus on his striking, he could be a very dangerous striker on the feet. So, yeah, I think Curtis has a good shot at hurting Chimaev on the feet if he so chooses to utilize his stand-up striking. That's not really Curtis's game plan in most of his fights. Statistically, though, Chimaev has the second best significant strike defense in the heavyweight division. So, on the contrary, though, Curtis Blaydes has the second lowest strikes absorbed per minute in the heavyweight division, and most of that is due to Curtis mostly dominating fights in the top position on the ground, so he's not getting hit a lot. But statistically, both of them have very good striking defense, and so I don't think this is going to be a very overly exciting fight if you're a fan of standing and banging. So I think given the striking advantage, I'll give the striking advantage to Chimaev just based off of he's more willing to exchange on the feet, and I think 2 knockouts in his last 3 fights, I think he's got more of a chance at really inflicting some damage on Curtis on the feet. So I'll give him the striking advantage. When it comes to grappling, though, so I mentioned I was going to touch on Curtis in a second, which I will, but Chimaev is a 5-time Sanchu Russian national champion, and I mentioned what that martial art is sort of composed of. So that guy has great balance, great hips, throws. He's got really tough takedown defense in the UFC as well at 67%. So, he's no slouch when it comes to the grappling game. But this is Curtis's clear pathway to victory here. Securing takedowns and going for the ground and pound against Chimaev. Curtis is the all-time leader in takedowns in the heavyweight division. He averages 6.79 takedowns per 15 minutes, which is ridiculous in any weight class, let alone the heavyweight division. It is just a phenomenal statistic. So ironically, though, Curtis averages 0 submissions per 15 minutes. He's never had a submission victory with the amount of time that he spends on top of guys. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, a rear naked choke or an armbar or a Kimura or something just hasn't opened up while he's been on top of somebody. It is pure wrestling and ground and pound for Curtis Blaydes. 47% of his strikes, significant strikes, coming from ground and pound. So that's his clear pathway to victory here in this fight and almost every fight. So my prediction, Curtis Blaydes, 11-2. He's only lost to Francis Ngannou twice. Nobody's been able to solve the Curtis Blaydes puzzle except Francis's big power. Chimaev does not have that kind of power. He does not pose that kind of threat, and I don't think Chimaev is going to be the guy to solve the Curtis Blaydes puzzle. I don't think there are many fighters in the heavyweight division that have that ability. Some at the top of the division, Stipe, DC, guys like that can. But I don't think Chimaev is one of those guys. I'm going Curtis Blaydes by unanimous decision in this fight. All right, our third fight of the night coming out of the lightweight division. We got number 15th ranked Islam Makhachev versus the Tasmanian Devil, Davi Hamas. Betting odds for this fight, Islam is a minus 285 favorite. And guys, this is a really, really interesting matchup. I am very much looking forward to this fight. You got Davi Hamas, who is a 32-year-old Brazilian with a 10-2 MMA record, 5'8", 72.5-inch reach, coming off of 4 wins in a row. This guy is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion and a third-degree black belt. 4 wins in a row, I mentioned. He's finished 3 of those via submission, and I believe they were all first-round submissions. I might be wrong about one of those fights, but 4 wins in a row, and I believe 3 first-round submissions for Davi Hamas. Absolute killer on the ground, that guy is. Islam Makhachev, though, everybody knows Islam as Habib's best friend, very close friend. He's a Dagestani fighter with a 17-1 professional MMA record, 5'10", 70.5-inch reach. He's coming off 5 consecutive victories after facing his only defeat in MMA, which was a knockout loss to Adriano Martins. His last fight was a highly impressive victory over Arman Sarukian, who everybody is really high on Arman, and it was a very good fight that Islam was really able to show his composure, his wrestling, his cardio, his striking. It was a very impressive performance by Islam. International Master of Sport in Combat Sambo, and as I mentioned, a member of Team AKA. So when it comes to striking, neither of these guys are knockout artists or even, strikers by any sense of the imagination, but both are very athletic guys, move really well, and throw really hard punches. Davi Hamas loves the right kick, loves trying to take your legs out from underneath you, and he tends to sort of like bait you in and throw really hard counter punches, whereas Islam is more of a pressure fighter, kind of like Habib. He moves forward. He's not overly technical with his striking, but he moves forward, throws combinations, closes the distance, and then goes for his takedowns. So Davi lands 84% of his strikes standing at a rate of 3.1 per minute and absorbs about 2.7 per minute. So it's not quite equal, but for almost every strike Davi lands, he's absorbing one as well, where Islam lands 44% of his strikes at distance at a rate of 2.2 significant strikes per minute, significantly lower than Davi. But out of 7 fights in the UFC, Islam Makhachev is the all-time UFC record holder, I guess you could say, for strikes absorbed per minute. Islam Makhachev only absorbs 0.83 significant strikes per minute, an all-time UFC record. Pretty impressive. Impeccable defense, both on the feet. That's due to 2 things. Very good defense on the feet, does not like to get hit, keeps his hands up and keeps moving really well. But he also spends so much time on top of opponents, they really don't have opportunities to hit him with significant strikes. So Davi gets the power advantage in this fight, but Islam definitely is the more technical striker. He's more in control of his movement, and statistically his defense is just impeccable, and so I do give Islam Makhachev the striking advantage in this fight. Grappling, though, is where it gets really interesting. So you've got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champ, a 3rd-degree black belt, versus a 4-time Russian national champion in Combat Sambo. So really interesting clash of styles here. Islam's bread and butter, Combat Sambo, but that requires taking opponents down to the ground, which is exactly where a 3rd-degree black belt wants to take the fight. So what happens when they get down there? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the art of submissions, whereas Combat Sambo incorporates submissions, but it also incorporates wrestling and striking and ground and pound and an unrelenting pressure that just smothers opponents. And so, today wrestling is without a doubt the most important aspect of mixed martial arts. If you're a young kid who someday wanted to be in the UFC, join a wrestling club. Join the wrestling team for your school. Knowing that Islam's wrestling is at such an extremely high level, Islam Makhachev has the 4th highest takedown accuracy in UFC history, 70.8%. I'll repeat that. Islam Makhachev has the 4th highest takedown accuracy rate in UFC history. So I believe that's going to be the difference maker in this fight. Davi Hamas can absolutely, as 3rd-degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, can absolutely sink in a choke, catch him in a triangle, catch him with an arm bar, catch him in something funky. He's that good. And he's so powerful. He's got a really tight squeeze. But Islam Makhachev, I give the technical striking advantage to. I give the wrestling advantage to. Pressure, control, ground and pound, defense. There are just too many aspects of this fight where I see Islam Makhachev having the clear advantage. And so My prediction, I think that for 3 rounds, this is nonstop action, up and down and up and down, right? Striking, takedowns, get up, striking, takedowns, get up. And I think that Islam Makhachev gets the unanimous decision win over Davi Hamas. So that wraps it up for part 1, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. If you liked what you saw, please give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to check out part 2. So in part 2, as I mentioned, covering the co-main event, Paul Felder and Edson Barboza, and the main event, the lightweight championship fight between Habib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Poirier. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.